Hello there and welcome to the Terrace Scottish Football Podcast. My name is Craig Telfer and right this very second I am joined by the first time in almost a month by my close associate Shaughan McGuigan.
Hello there.
And do you know what happens when the Errol Musk and Jana Biesenhout, I think I've pronounced that correctly, of the Terrace Podcast get together? That is right, despite the fact there's a 42-year age gap between us both and the fact that I'm his stepdaughter and he's known me since the age of 4, we are going to enter into a romantic relationship and he's going to father 2 children with me. Oh, weird. And along the way, we might get the chance to get into a conversation about some lower league Scottish football.
How many children does Elon Musk have?
Elon Musk has got 14 children.
How? Like, how does he encourage so many women to have sex with him? I don't really understand it.
Because he's very wealthy. I mean, Michael Jackson had Blanket, I'm sure, was an IVF baby to a woman called Debbie Rowe. In fact, I'm sure at one intro we'd been the Michael Jackson and Debbie Rowe of the Terrace get together.
Michael Jackson had loads of good albums. Elon Musk has 0 good albums, 0 good chart lines, surely. I don't understand it.
Listen, money talks. Money talks, although judging by the stuff with Ashley St. Clair at the moment, dating this podcast, it's not all going very well for him. But no, that was his father, Errol Musk, who is a bit of a villain. So you can see where he gets it from.
Is that the guy that has the diamond mine?
Yes, aye. He's got the weird eyebrows and somehow pitches up on like British television in the morning to complain about Keir Starmer and come away with like really racist, really like sort of right-leaning views that go unchallenged.
I don't like the sound of him.
No, neither do I. But we're not here to talk about Errol Musk or Elon Musk or his dreadful companies. We are here to talk about Sunday's SPFL Trust Trophy final, Raith Rovers' demolition of Hamilton Academical, the League One title race, and Clyde's last gasp victory of Stranraer. There's plenty for us to get through, and if you play your cards right, we might just have a laugh in there at some point. But before we get going, Shaughan, I have been away for the past 3 weeks, gallivanting with some very handsome men and Danny Denham. I've ignored you and your well-being. How are you? Is everyone okay?
Listen, I'm fine. I have noticed that you've been philandering for a number of weeks now. I tell you what happened to me today. That was I'm not saying this most exciting story of all times, but it was just very awkward. There's a new kind of shop opened up at the bottom of my street, and I'd only ever walked past it until today, and it said, for all your one-stop grocery needs. Now, it was called Coconut, which I thought was quite interesting. But it doesn't really sound like a co-op or whatever, but regardless, your one-stop grocery needs. That goes right well. What I'll do is, I get half an hour for my lunch. I'll go down, I'll get something for the kind of dinner. So went down, opened the door, and as soon as I opened the door, it made a noise, and somebody ran out for the back. And I kind of got the impression that somebody coming in the shop was a novelty, judging by this person's demeanour. He was like, hi there. And the shop was resplendent. I felt like nobody had ever been in it. But what I realised, it was like it was more of a wholesaler.
Okay.
And it was like kind of Indian foods. Right. And I was like, I really just wanted like a kind of tin of soup or something. But this guy was like, his customer service was so good and he was so pleased to see me. I was like, well, I cannot leave here without buying something. But then I just totally panicked. So I just bought 8 kitchen roll. I bought this flat maybe 21 years ago. I don't know if I've used 8 kitchen roll in 21 years. So what I'm saying is, if anybody needs a kitchen roll, please give me a shout and I'll send one out, because I'm never getting through 8.
The vibes you're giving off, Shaughan, you're giving off the vibes of a survivalist who's planning for the doomsday, or a very greedy man during the early days of the COVID pandemic.
I just wanted to buy something. I thought, I must buy something. This guy's really nice. And I just totally panicked. There was nothing else to buy.
Well, to be fair, I mean, at least you for kitchen rolls, there will be a practical use and you will use them. It's not like you bought like a big bag of lentils, like a cement bag size of lentils, and you left the shop with it over your shoulder. But
actually, the other option is like a kind of 10 kilogram bag of rice. I was like, I cannot possibly buy this. I'm at total panic stations. Anyway, how have you been?
Yes, I absolutely fine. Absolutely fine. I've been working away. I've been interviewing football players. Life is good. Life is rich. So I'm really not in a position to complain, Shaughan. Really not in a position to complain.
You've been with a kind of lower league football pretty much week in, week out. Fair play to you.
I thought they were. It's an interesting concept, and I think they were generally well received. That to speak to, it's all very well that you and I talking about what goes on in the lower leagues from our perspective as supporters, but to talk to players, beg your pardon, that actually play there, and finding out exactly how and why things work, because you've got your own idea as to why this team is performing like that under these circumstances. But when you get the chance to talk to a player that's done it, it's far more interesting not saying it's far more interesting, sorry, watch what I'm saying. You're getting a different perspective. That's what I meant to say. You're getting a different perspective on things.
Well, that's class. So here's me, who's obviously less interesting, but let's go.
Shaughan, well, yeah, there's not much I can say about that. I'm looking forward to this. Because, like I say, we've got a lot to get through, and we'll start by looking at the SPFL Trust Trophy final on Sunday at the Falkirk Stadium, where Livingston thrashed Queen's Park 5-0, and probably one of the most one-sided finals in recent memory. Goals from Robbie Muirhead, Stevie May, Teki Yenge, Andrew Shinnie and Jamie Brandon secured victory for the Lions, and it saw them lift the Challenge Cup for only the second time in their history. The first time was 10 years ago. Brilliant afternoon for the club, but a very harrowing one for Queen's Park. And so we can look at it from both perspectives. Shaughan, I was there. You watched it on the television, but we'll come to you first. What did you make of Livingston 5, Queen's Park 0?
I suspected Livingston would win. I didn't think it would be quite as straightforward as it was. I suppose the thing with Queen's Park, they were already... Let's face it, they've been weakened since January. They seem to be acclimatising injuries ever since then. And then even from their starting 11, and as it was on Sunday, they picked up another couple of injuries, like Will Tizard, for example, who's probably like the most experienced defender, for example, that they had in the starting 11. He went off injured after whatever it was, 20 minutes. But it was so easy for Livingston. And I think from a Queen's Park perspective, the fact that this was there, it should be a source of pride, I suppose. Like getting to their first cup final in 125 years.
Yeah, that's right.
Some nonsense. But actually, their first cup final in 125 years was probably quite humiliating, and I could quite understand why Spiders fans are so annoyed and so pissed off at the direction that the club are going in. Like we have, I think, spoken about over the last 4 or 5 years, the fact that, yes, off the park kind of hasn't felt like they're in a position where they should be, but on the park has kind of balanced that out, I suppose. But now it feels like what is happening on the park reflects what is happening off the park, and that is a big issue, I suppose. Yeah,
I can't disagree with any of the points there. I suppose we'll start by talking about Livingston, because, it's quite easy to get through Livingston. I got to say, I think it was, and what I mean by easy to get through, it's easy to get through because there's not really much to analyse there. And I don't want to put down their performance, because they were really good. I think from minute one, Danny Wilson, Ryan McGowan had the cigars out. I know there was a bit in the opening 20 minutes or so, there's a wee bit of back and forth, and Zach Rudden got in behind and almost forced Jerome Pryor into a save. Other than that, McGowan and Wilson strolled through this game. Absolutely strolled through it. In the midfield, Stephen Kelly had a fantastic game for them. Macaulay Tate did a lot of running and shut down any time Queen's Park tried to get something going. Macaulay Tate was right on top of it to shut it down. And Robbie Muirhead was excellent, deserved his Man of the Match award. Teki Yenge, slow start, frustrating player when you see him in the flesh of one of those games. But he grew into the match and was able to contribute. Stevie May had a good performance. And I think it was just frictionless, is the word I'd use to describe it. Jerome Pryor had to make a double save at 3-0. But by that point, the game was completely gone. And it was just so straightforward for Livingston. I don't think there'll be a more one. I was thinking of all the finals that I've seen in Scottish football, this is probably the most one-sided that we've seen since Hearts and Hibs met in the Scottish Cup final in 2012. When you've got two teams in the same division, when there's just such a big gulf between them.
So you're potentially right. The only one I thought about also featured Livingston. Livingston versus Alloa. Challenge Cup final 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Was that 4-0, I think?
I've got to say, I think though the Alloa were a part-time team at that period. I know Livingston weren't a particularly good full-time team, so I can maybe see the point. This is more grievous though. I thought this was far more grievous and embarrassing for them. But got to say, I thought Livingston fans I think sold out their allocation in the main stand. I think they sold out about 2/3 of the stand behind the goals. They were loud, noisy. They had drums, flags. They had inflatable hammers, which I thought was quite a nice touch, and maybe a wee rib at for Falkirk fans who have been calling them hammer throwers all over the course of the season to turn in such a polished performance in their own backyard. Might have been a wee dig at them, but regardless, it's a funny trophy, the SPFL Trust Trophy, because it doesn't matter until it does. We've spoken about it in the past where if a team loses in the SPFL Trust Trophy, it doesn't necessarily matter. If they win, it doesn't necessarily matter unless you want these results to matter, if you know what I mean. If you're trying to analyse something and you're using these results to back up or discredit a point. And then when it gets to the semi-final, when teams think they've got a legitimate chance of winning the competition, then there's quite a lot of stock put in the games. But seeing Livingston there, seeing their supporters, I think they really enjoyed themselves. And there's a bonus podcast that's gone out earlier on Tuesday where Craig Fowler's interviewed Callum Stewart and Liam Innes, a Queen's Park fan and a Livingston fan respectively, getting their perspective of the game that's worth listening to. Hearing Liam Innes speak about how much fun this was, it's a good listen. So yeah, the competition does mean something, and hopefully Livingston can use this as a springboard to go on for even more success this season.
I think you're absolutely right. I think in terms of it's not important until it becomes important is a good way to kind of classify it. I would go further. I think everybody involved, probably players, almost certainly managers, a lot of supporters, find it a bit of a pest. Certainly when it comes to like the kind of early rounds. And you're right, maybe the quarterfinals, certainly the semi-finals. That's when people start to kind of sit upright and think, well, this could mean something this season. Because let's face it, certainly when it comes to the supporters and probably for a lot of the players, suddenly they have an opportunity to lift a trophy, and that doesn't come around too often. And I've certainly been in, and I've certainly experienced both sides of it. Like obviously, like beat Rangers in the final in whatever year that was, 2014. That's different. If you beat Rangers in the final, it's a very different thing. But beating Queen of South in the final was still a great day. Mm-hmm. Like sitting with your pals and being out with your pals and watching Rafe. Remember, like John McGlynn put Lewis Vaughan on the bench, not because he was fit, but just to give him a chance to lift the trophy. Amazing, so he wasn't fit to play, but like that was a really cool thing. But then 12 months later, losing to Hamilton, I was still gutted that day. It was still a really, really kind of horrific feeling to lose a final. So can totally appreciate whatever perspective the Livingston fans or the Queen's Park fans are feeling this day. But they're absolutely right. Doesn't really matter until it matters. In terms of it, it's interesting what you said about whether it has any impact on maybe like Livingston going forward. And see, in terms of, I suppose there's slight parallels. See, when they won it 10 years ago, that was when they had the 5-point deduction in the championship. And certainly at that point, it looked like they were kind of nailed on to get relegated. They went on and beat Falkirk in the next league game. And then they went on a brilliant run. I think Hibs was the only team to beat them in the last maybe half dozen games. Got a draw with Rangers as well. So it felt like 10 years ago that cup win was a catalyst for keeping them in the championship. And I still think it's a different matter in terms of trying to win the league. I think they have too much to do. But you never know. And if something similar could happen, then maybe they could. But I still think there's a wee bit too much to do for Livy.
I think it's important to say we're recording this podcast on Tuesday evening, so on the Wednesday, Livingston are going to Dunfermline to take them on. You'd fancy Livingston to get the win there, so we don't know what's going to happen, so we can't really look too far ahead into the future. We can only really analyse the game. And as well as Livingston's performance, they scored some really nice goals in the match. Now, at the time, you're thinking some of them are really good. I think all of them, or certainly most of them, could have been preventable. I was looking at like Robbie Muirhead's goal. It's a fantastic finish to control it and then spin round and hit it. It's a brilliant goal. But Jamie Brandon's cross isn't particularly well hit. It takes 2 bounces before it reaches him. And thinking, why wasn't anyone there to clear that? The second goal, Stevie May's goal, you could almost see that happening in slow motion. You know, the 1-2 between May and Tete Yengi. You could see that happening in slow motion with Zach Mockin. It looked like he just switched off and allowed May to run round him. The third goal, terrible defending between Callum Ferry and Ben Jackson, but really indecisive as who was going to go for the ball, and Yengi's able to capitalise. The fourth goal takes a big deflection, and the fifth goal, a good hit from Brandon. I'm not sure if Ferry could have done better. I thought that at the time when I was sitting in the ground. I'm not, and seeing it in replays, maybe I'm being too harsh on Callum Ferry, but I thought he could have maybe done better there. Not to take away from the quality strikes, it was a very well hit, and Robbie Muirhead's goal was lovely hit, but I just think they could have perhaps been better defended from Queen's Park perspective. But
you know, just think that ultimately that sums everything up. So let's say Queen's Park, so going into the January transfer window, Queen's Park, I think, were sitting fourth. They had Murray on loan from Celtic playing centre half. They had Dom Thomas, who was having a pretty good season, kind of out wide. Both of those players departed. Their January transfer window, in terms of players coming in, I don't think was particularly good. Then what's happened is they've had a particularly rocky time of it when it comes to injuries.
Yes.
So even if Queen's Park were at full strength, this is still a team that is weaker than they were when they went into January. And certainly on Sunday, they probably had 8, 9 players out. So I wasn't. So you're absolutely right in terms of what you described. Like, it was defended poorly, but I just think that's where Queen's Park are at this moment in time. That they're essentially almost like a certainly on Sunday, I almost felt like that was their B team. And I know that's a daft thing to say.
No, I know what you
when
mean.
It comes to Championship side, but they were certainly not at full strength by a million miles.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if Livingston had any key players out missing. I don't think so. I think that's perhaps their preferred back four of Montano and Brandon at fullback, McGuigan and Wilson in the middle, Tate, Kelly and Pittman in the middle, and then May, Yengi and Muirhead up front. I think that's Livingston is close to full strength, and you can just see the difference between the sides. Like I'm very complimentary of Ryan McGuigan, and not just because I did a podcast with him last week.
That's part of it, though. That's part of it, though.
But just in terms of like how to read Zach Rudden, we know that Zach Rudden isn't perhaps as Zach Rudden has got his qualities, but he needs a bit of a hand when he's leading the line, and I don't think that the way that Queen's Park are playing lends into that. And you could just tell the way that McGuigan and Wilson, anytime they came up against him, knew exactly how to deal with him. Just like if it was just to lean into him or what he was going to do with the ball, it was very straightforward. And that's even if the ball got that far up the park anyway, because of the hard work of Pittman and Tate and closing it down. And then there was periods in the game, I think it might have been before or just after the third goal had gone in the second half. I think there was a period, it's not an exaggeration to say, it must have been about like 60, 90 seconds where Livingston just had the ball, working it across the back into the front. I remember at one point, I think when the ball went into the box, they fluffed the chance, but that would have been something, there could have been about 15, 16, 17 passes involved in getting the ball from the back four through to the front. And I've used the word again, frictionless, just how easy it was to, I wouldn't even say it was a hot knife through butter, it was just somebody putting a chopstick through butter more than anything else. That's how easy it was for them. And that's not to take away from it, because, you know, they've had going into this game, Queen's Park really had the better of them. I think it was 2 draws and a defeat in the 3 matches over against them this season. But that was a really emphatic way to get the better of them and get rid of that hex, for want of a better expression.
Yeah, and I do think it was a good example of that. I know there's been a wee bit of a theory that Livingston don't really play football. They're a kind of long ball team and not a good team to watch. And I don't think that's necessarily, I wouldn't say that's a million miles away. I do think they're direct. I don't think they're necessarily a terrible team to watch. I think that's maybe I think a lot of Falkirk fans have potentially said that, probably because Livingston have, as you say, got a bit of hex over Falkirk this season. But see, in terms of if you've got a midfield three of Pittman and Kelly and who else is in there actually?
Macaulay Tate, not cloggers. So there's guys that want to play football.
That's a decent kind of footballing trio. So you're right. I thought it was a I thought it was good to watch from a Livingston perspective, but certainly in terms of, and again, I think this is something that kind of hamstrings Queen's Park. I saw Zach Rudden at Starts Park last season. I find him hugely frustrating, but part of that frustration is because he cannot play up front on his own. Everything bounces off him. He's not particularly good at holding the ball up. He will go, if you're playing the ball long, he'll go behind the centre half rather than go in front of him and maybe win it. So that is not how Rudden, that's not how to get the best out of him. But ultimately, that's how Queen's Park play. But it's not working. But here we are in, well, the end of March, beginning of April, and they're still playing Zach Rudden up front on his own. It's very, very annoying if you're a Spiders fan.
And this leads us to the good stuff now, to be able to talk about Queen's Park in a bit of depth. As we touched on at the start, you've waited 125 years to appear in a National Cup final competition, and you humiliate yourself, and you turn in such an abject, disappointing performance. I mean, I was at the game. I ended up sitting next to Callum and Enzo from the Spiders Talk podcast, and they're really, really nice guys. Good to get the chance to hang out with them. Just purely coincidentally, was sitting next to me and got speaking to them. But my old physics teacher, Miss Bailey, was sitting just another row behind me, and I was speaking to her at the start. So I was speaking to the Queen's Park fans I encountered before the game. I was asking, how are you feeling going into it? And everyone was the same. They're just saying, we're going to lose this. Nobody was excited for it. There wasn't even, a glimmer of that degree of optimism. When you're thinking, hey, listen, you never know if it goes our way, we get a break of the ball, we score first or whatever. There was none of that. And as soon as Robbie Muirhead opened the scoring, I think it was Callum next to me turned and says, "That's it, we're not winning this." Because Queen's Park they've got a horrendous record. If they go behind first, very, very rarely do they come back into it, and it proved to be the case. And the fact that injuries have been a massive problem. There was like guys like are missing. Cammy Kerr, Charlie Frocks, Nicola Udja is out missing. Jack Thompson's missing. Grant Savory's missing. He's been out for the best part of the fact. He's been out for the entire season, in fact. So there's guys that would come in and into the team and make them better. So I've got sympathy with Steve McLean and Shaughan Crichton, the interim manager and assistant respectively, in that regard. But what was out there was just no personality, no... Like they lacked it. It was, like you say, easy for Livingston to play against, and you got the degree of sympathy because young guys are taking their first steps in the game. But even just like lack of bravery on the ball, nobody prepared to take responsibility for it, and that as soon as he went behind, that was it. And there was a degree of toxicity as well, which is something I would never ever associate with a team like Queen's Park. There was parts, I think it was 1-0 down, maybe 2-0 down. There was chants of, Callum Davidson. And I was thinking, oof, that's quite pointed, because I knew who those chants were being aimed at. They were being aimed at Darren O'Donnell. And I think if Willie Hawhey was there sitting up towards where the directors were, those chants were definitely aimed at the pair of them. And then the third goal went in right after the second half began. And then there was a chance of like, get out of our club, Darren O'Donnell, get out of our club. And the fans got more and more exasperated as the half went on. The worse it got, there was sack the board. And it's just, that is not, those reactions are just not what I would associate with Queen's Park. But I can understand where that exasperation comes from. I can completely understand where that exasperation comes from when the team just feels, said it loads of times, but what is this team? What are we trying to be with Queen's Park? Because it doesn't feel like you're not going to be if you want to be like a good championship club, you're going the wrong way about it. And if you want to be a team that brings through and develop young players, you're going the wrong way about it, because you've got loads of young guys that are there, but they don't look, they're not making the team better. No one can be developing and improving their performances in that environment at the moment. It's just there's something really not right there.
Yeah, nothing really makes sense. I suppose if you go back to probably the first 3 or 4 months of last season, we spoke about the fact that Veldman and Bucher would do things like bringing on 3 school children when they're winning a game with 20 minutes to go. Well, that's really, really silly. And funnily enough, when Callum Davidson's come in, one of the things he did to help matters was bring in Killian Sheridan, a player and Welsh in the middle of the park. So experienced players that we, funnily enough, didn't think would work, but it absolutely did. And they still had a kind of young, inexperienced side, but you had experienced players dotted around in kind of important areas of the park that helped them through a difficult period and helped them stay up. It kind of feels like it's went the opposite way this season. So obviously Payton went in the summer. Sheridan wasn't kept on, and you totally understand why that's the case. But the fact that Dom Thomas went in January, and let's face it, he was their shining light. But it kind of feels like they're ending the season how they started last season, where they just have an abundance of inexperienced players who aren't quite good enough for the level that they're playing at, and they might, even if they stay up this season, and I think they will, because I do think the gap between themselves and Dunfermline and Hamilton is just about enough, even though they're dreadful at this moment in time. But there needs to be serious questions asked in the summer about, well, like what the Queen's Park stand for exactly. What is their aims? What is like in terms of their stadium, in terms of their squad, in terms of how do you attract fans? Because if I was a Queen's Park fan, I'd be hugely frustrated at what's happened over the last 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, there was, I think after the fourth goal went in, the fans were just streaming for the exits by that point. There was a couple that hung around towards the end, but the fourth goal really signalled an exodus from that. And just on that, Shaughan, I was looking at, Queen's Park, they turned professional in 2019. So we're coming on to they're looking for their sixth manager in 6 years. And I really think since turning professional, you just need to look at the kind of managers that they've gone through, just to a team that just don't know what it is they're looking to do. So they started off turning professional there. Mark Roberts was the manager at the time when they transitioned from amateur football into professional. I always felt it was a matter of time before he was moved on, so I'm not really counting him. But they brought in Mr. Raymond McKinnon, who had, for all his time in full-time football had been mixed. I think that's fair to say. Decent with Wraith Rovers, like decent-ish with Dundee United, maybe like flopped at Green. I mean, I suppose he wasn't at Green at Morton long enough to call him a flop, but then relegated with Falkirk and not able to build immediately come back up into the Championship. However, job done with Queen's Park in terms of bringing through a couple of young players and getting them out of League 2 into League 1 at the first time I'm asking. He's binned off and Laurie Ellis comes in. And Laurie Ellis, I think quite a popular player from his time at Wraith Rovers.
Very.
But very much quite different from McKinnon and being not being a manager, but being a head coach with the idea that you will work with a committee of people, like a transfer committee or whatever, to bring through young players, develop this style on the training pitch and take the team forward. That didn't work. Then it's that Owen Coyle comes in, who's very much an old-fashioned manager. And Owen Coyle, it looked as though it was going somewhere with Owen Coyle, because he took them into the Championship via the playoffs, almost got them into the Premiership, had they not lost in that final day of the season to Dundee. Then Coyle moves on, and then they go back to a head coach with Robin Veldman coming in. Veldman, we touched on him there, a flop. Fair to say. You remember that? We all remember that game against Airdrie when young Will Tizard tried to dribble the ball at defence, lost it, conceded a goal, subbed on the 43rd minute. And then Davidson comes in, who feels like more like a old school manager who's got like complete control of the club. He moves on, and then we don't know who's going to be coming into the end of the season. Is it going to be Steve McLean staying there alongside Sean Crichton? Are they looking to have Crichton in there because he worked with the B team and will know them and be able to bring the players forward? There was talk. I listened to the Queen's Park Fans podcast, the Spiders Talk, and they were saying that they speculated whether they had got rid of Davidson looking to bring someone in, and that ultimately didn't come to fruition, so they're effectively stuck with McLean and Crichton. But do you see what I mean? They'll go in a certain direction, hasn't worked, so then they completely do a 180, and it doesn't work, so they're flip-flopping between these two different styles. They've been doing it for the past 6 years. mean, if you understand, it's like one thing. Sorry, Shaughan. It's like one thing. If you want to go down the young manager route, fine. But then the next manager has got to be like a young up and coming guy who's good at working with young players. If you want to go down, get Jim Duffy in. That's the next logical thing. If you want to go for an old school manager, get Jim Duffy in. But it's like, what is it that we're looking to do here? And I don't know. I don't know what we're looking to do here.
I thought Coyle was the interesting one because let's face it, considering everything he achieved at the club and everything Queen's Park achieved in general, like he probably wasn't the total catalyst. But it went down the last day of the season, and if they'd beaten Dundee, they would have got promoted to the top flight. He wasn't kept on for the next season. Now, why was that? Because surely you would want him to stick around, and it was probably because of the direction that the club wanted to go in, which was have a hugely inexperienced squad, and then potentially get them experience and maybe sell them on. And to a degree, maybe it worked. I mean, they sold the goalkeeper, for example, I forget his name.
Callum McKenna.
McKenna, for example. So that kind of worked. But regardless, you could see whether it was Coyle had an issue and was dismissed, or whether Coyle was like, I can see what's coming here. This isn't for me. But you're right. It feels like they make a decision. It doesn't go well. They bring in an experienced manager to essentially keep them up. But then what they essentially want to do going forward isn't something that an experienced manager wants to be involved with. They're just they're a very strange football club.
I suppose if you were Coyle and you were looking to try and win the championship, we're selling our best player, Simon Murray, to Ross County. We're doing what now? And then I'd imagine that if you'd finished in third place that season, the next time, well, we've finished third place, how can we build on? How can we finish in first place next season? Can I go and sign? Can I get the funds to go and sign a big striker who's going to replace him, trying to get like 15, 20 goals? Oh, we're not going to do that. We're going to bring Rory Payton, and to be fair, Payton was pretty good, but it's not the. Do you know what I mean? Murray had played at a high level and dropped down and was really good, whereas Payton was on his way up. So yes. Payton wasn't as much of a guarantee as Murray would have been, if you see what I mean. And I think Coyle would have been like, well, why am I wanting to take a step backwards? This isn't that doesn't feel right. And so that's why they're into the position. I mean, if you want to go down and get a manager who can work with young players, Michael McIndoe seems like the most obvious one, because he's proven this season that he's a fantastic coach, good at working with young players and toughening them up and turning them into something tangible. But whether or not he would want to, I mean, that sounds daft, whether or not he'd want to leave Edinburgh City. But that's what it feels like at the moment. It feels like that Edinburgh City feel like a club on the way up, whereas Queen's Park don't.
I'm not sure about Edinburgh City, but I know what you mean in terms of Edinburgh City being a club on the up. How I feel about Michael McIndoe in Edinburgh City is a wee bit like David Martindale in Livingston.
Yeah,
and it's not exactly in with the bricks, but I do think that McIndoe is a unique and quite interesting character, and I am not entirely sure that he would work in as successful as he's been and as complimentary as we have been about him, and such a good job he's done with Edinburgh. I'm not entirely sure he would replicate that in many other clubs in Scotland.
I can see that. It feels like at Edinburgh he has got the whole run of things.
Yes.
Whereas I think at Queen's Park, it feels like you're answering to it's Darren O'Donnell who looks like he's got the run of things. So that'd be quite a difficult thing to square. Did you watch Callum Ferry's post-match interview at all?
Yes, he just looked like a guy who's completely fed up and potentially. Was he slagging players off? Was he maybe not slagging them off, but he seemed exasperated that maybe loan players, or he was exasperated, put it that way. Yeah,
I mean, it's very easy for I imagine every single player wants to win a cup, because even at the age of 20, that a Challenge Cup might be the only thing you win. Mm-hmm. But just when you have like a group of loan players, there's not as much at stake for them as there is with players who are contracted there. Ferry's been there a long time. I'm sure Ferry must be their longest serving player.
Yeah,
Longridge maybe might be their longest serving player. I'm not 100% sure, but for him that'd be smart, because he's had a good season, and it feels like the hard work he's been doing has perhaps been undermined by guys that just aren't trying. It's hard enough, and that's watch what I say that because I'm sure everyone's trying. I think it was just like real frustration, but not getting tight enough to players, or letting somebody run off you, or just not being aggressive enough and going for a 50-50. Like all the things at Livingston where Queen's Park just couldn't match them. And on top of that, my main takeaway from the Callum Fair interview, he's got the same hair as Jim Spence.
Yes, you're right. He really needs to maybe look into that a wee bit more.
I mean, the final thing I'll say about the game was it was quite actually difficult to get to. I parked up at the Falkirk College, and the path down by the side of the road, which is a roundabout, a main road before you go into the Falkirk Stadium, that was all like cordoned off. So basically, you're walking into traffic alongside the road. So that I didn't like that. That wasn't particularly safe. And to cap off the day, I left my sunglasses. I think I've lost them in the stadium.
Oh no.
Yeah, they've got these are a pair of Ray-Ban Wayfarers. They've got CGT inside one leg and FK5 in the other. And I emailed Falkirk to ask if anyone had handed them in, and I'm sure that Falkirk are just nobody's handed them in, and the person just cracked them and chucked them away. That's what happens when you slag off the club for the past however long we've been doing this podcast for.
I'm sure somebody like Shaughan Elderbrand, they wouldn't do that. He's a good egg. If they've been found, listen, if they've been found, then they will be returned to you.
Shaughan Elderbrand, if you know where my sunglasses are, please do get in touch. I was pricing up another pair of Ray-Bans to customise. They've gone up in price since I bought them 5 years ago. So please do let me know if you have them. But Shaughan, that's probably enough to talk about we're talking for 40 minutes in the one game. My God. We'll talk about the championship match. This was an interesting one because we're talking about teams with disaffected fan bases, so we might as well talk about Hamilton Academical and their latest defeat. They lost 3-0 to Wraith Rovers at the weekend. Dylan Easton opened the scoring just before the interval, and Callum Fordyce and Josh Mullen completed the rout in the second half. As of recording, as I mentioned Tuesday evening, Hamilton still mired in a relegation battle, and the Rovers bobbling along in mid-table, just 6 points from that final playoff place. You were there, Shaughan, I understand?
No, I wasn't there. I watched this on my laptop, and I watched Ayr United versus Dunfermline on my phone, thanks to some dubious links. But I did watch the game. You
were recreating The Man Who Fell to Earth, but instead you were watching. It was like instead of like daytime television, it was lower league Scottish football, and you're not trying to build rocket ships to take water back to your home planet.
No, I was just looking to see if Finlay Pollock could have a shot at goal. I thought Wraith were decent, but I do think that they are probably the less interesting team to talk about.
Yeah,
like certainly in terms of, like, I thought going into this game, bear in mind that I thought Hamilton had some decent performances, if not necessarily results, over the last few weeks. I thought they done quite well against Falkirk, drew 2-2. I thought they done quite well against Ayr. Was that the week before? Mm-hmm. Ayr required like a kind of 95th minute equaliser to get a point. So I thought Hamilton would have got something from this game. But see, after like 25, 30 minutes, almost the entire game took place in Hamilton's half. Yeah. Like nothing was happening. There was nothing from a Wraith perspective to be worried about. And I always felt like a goal was coming. Now, Easton's goal was good. It essentially almost done the same thing about 5 minutes before. You were saying it's good though, Shaughan, but watching those highlights, the thing I was struck by was a total lack of aggression from Hamilton Accies, and that goal summed it up, because he was able to, I think he picked up the ball on the edge of the penalty box on the right hand side and was able to cut in, and no one thought, oh Christ, maybe I need to give my mate a hand here and prevent it, and then he shoots and there's a good finish and goes into the net there. But the fact that he was able to keep on doing that without pressure, I thought, oh, that's really bad on Hamilton's part. But that was kind of that kind of summed Hamilton up for the entire game. Like there was no, see, even when they conceded a goal, nobody really seemed that fussed. Like there was no, like, let's say things aren't going particularly well at Steny, for example. You would imagine it's somebody, whether it's Buchanan, for example, will turn around and start point a finger and start demanding standards, I suppose. There was none of that. There was none of that from Hamilton on Saturday.
I was looking at particularly the second goal, which is just it's a corner kick, really. It's a free kick. Dylan McGuigan gives away the free kick and just completely loses Callum Fordyce for an unmarked header inside the box. And you're looking at Dylan McGuigan and be like, you're the experienced one, but no one seems to dig him out. It's like, oh well, back to the centre circle we go. And most clubs wouldn't tolerate that. You'd be like, what the fuck did you let him run off you for? You're the person we were looking to hold this defence together. What are you letting him run off you for? And
you don't want to say that Hamilton players have down tools, because that makes a suggestion about their attitude. However, watching that game on Saturday, if you could say a team had down tools, it was very much that. It was very much that team. And see, as soon as the second goal went in, there wasn't not a huge fan base, home fan base, but they essentially just turned, and they are like, you can kind of even from the kind of camera angle you could see, it kind of felt like the home fans kind of turned, and almost rather than watching what was happening on the park, they were essentially just venting their spleen at the board, venting their spleen at John Rankin. Yeah. And again, similar to Queen's Park, you can kind of understand why.
I mean, we'd spoken about the podcast when Hamilton played Dunfermline, and I sat there like this. Ooh, something bad's going to happen here, and we mentioned that the fans just seemed to be waiting for something to go wrong just so they could vent their frustrations. And certainly, I think you need to be inside the stadium to really get a feel for that. But one of the things that was noticeable when Josh Mullins scored the third goal, and I got to say, really, really nicely well worked goal from Raith Rovers. I think there's a lot of one-touch passing in the middle of the park to work the ball forward is really, really good. It's a very eye-catching goal, albeit one that could have been stopped at numerous points along the way. But you can hear the fans singing, Rankin out, Rankin out, Rankin out, Rankin out at that point. And that's audible from a camera that's across the other side of the ground in the gantry there. So all's not well. I mean, that hasn't been well for a long time at Hamilton, and how that gets resolved on the current climate with like Director of Football Jerry Strain, Serif Sengen, the owner, Colin McGowan, whether or not he's still involved at the club, whether or not that can be resolved between the manager, the fans and the board, I don't think it can be.
It's weird because I remember us doing a podcast after Raith had dismantled Partick Thistle at Starks Park. I can't remember when exactly he was kind of relieved of his duties, but I remember saying on the podcast, I left Starks Park thinking Chris Doolan could be in bother here. That was such a one-sided, such an inept performance from Thistle that Doolan could be in bother here. And likewise on Saturday, I was like, that was so like toothless from Hamilton, a team that was desperate to stay up. Raith, let's face it, Raith had nothing to play for there. Yeah. Like they're not going to get promoted. They'll finish 5th or 6th. Probably an ideal team, really, that you want to play if you're desperate for 3 points. And yet it could easily have been 4 or 5 for Raith. So I did wonder if Rankin might have got his jotters. But I didn't really expect it because of this kind of, I don't know how to describe it, a kind of weird scenario at Hamilton where Rankin doesn't seem to be held responsible. And let's face it, Rankin should have been out the door a long time ago.
Yeah, I think that there's the podcast that's gone out today. I think it dropped, the Improving Scottish Football podcast, where the guy Kieran Hennigan that runs it interviews Jerry Strain, the Director of Football, and I've not had the chance to listen to it yet because I was going to listen to it when I was in the gym earlier today, but I saw that Queen's Park one dropped, and I thought that's because it was a game I was at, I'd probably was a bit more interest in that, so I'll catch up with the Improving Scottish Football podcast. But Jerry Strain's on it, and the comments, certainly on social media and on YouTube, are quite mixed. I think that they're people just don't believe him. Hamilton fans just don't believe the stuff that he says, and aren't having him, and it's that degree of toxicity. It's not helpful to anyone. It's, you wonder why people would be involved in clubs. Why would you want to be involved when about the 700-800 odd Hamilton Accies fans that go every week are just like dead against you? But I'm sure he addresses the John Rankin situation and said that after winning promotion from League One, he deserved another crack at it. And I think he's the unifying candidate. I think it's somebody that brings the unity candidate that brings it all together.
He'd also got the team relegated the season before.
Yeah, I know. It's you saw like at Dunfermline with Michael Tidser moving on, and you wonder, that was quite a decisive act from the board, and you can maybe, particularly the stuff with this crypto gambling company that they seem to be promoting, which is geo-blocked in the United Kingdom. There's definitely questions to be asked about that. But at least on the pitch, it's not working. We're getting rid of it before it gets worse. And at Hamilton, it just feels like, how can you be in New Douglas Park every week, hearing what the fans are chanting, like all of them just chanting, and not think, right, we need to galvanise the club might be in everyone's best interest if we go in a different direction. I don't know.
I remember when, even going into the playoffs, when Wraith had John Hughes in charge, and I was like, right, okay, we now just have the playoffs to kind of navigate, but regardless, get rid of John Hughes, because he is providing nothing positive to this football club. And maybe if whoever, somebody within the playing squad to be in charge for 2 games, 4 games, whatever it is, surely you give yourself a better chance of staying up. Now, Rovers didn't do that, but it feels like Hamilton probably should do that. I don't think they will for a minute, but it feels like they probably should.
There was a funny bit, Shaughan. I read the comments on YouTube underneath that Improving Scottish Football podcast. And there's one of them that says, 35 minutes in and this interview is a shit show. I get he is trying his very best to explain the current situation and circumstances to how they arrived, but it sounds like an episode of Jeremy Kyle. And I think Kieran Herrigan replies with, cheers, buddy. And it reminded me of your interaction with was it Callum McFadden after the John Hughes podcast.
Yeah. I'd pointed out 3 or 4 things that were entirely inaccurate, and he just replied, "Thanks for listening."
I like that. I suppose it's difficult. I've not listened to it, but you'd ideally want Strain to be challenged by a Hamilton fan, someone who's living with it in the day to day and can openly challenge these things. Now, I don't know if Kieran Herrigan's done that. I will give it a listen, but it's just, I just don't know how you could be bothered with that degree of toxicity. I think that football does have such an allure and such a hold on people that you want to, like there was like sunk cost fallacy. Like the more money you put into something, you want to keep putting more money into it in the event that you'll ultimately get themselves out of it. I don't know if Hamilton are like that.
I suppose as well from Rankin's perspective, I don't know how these things work. But bear in mind, he was inexplicably given a long-term deal. What was it, 6 months ago, 12 months ago? If he was to kind of jack it in, does he still get that contract paid up? I'm not entirely sure. So I can understand why Rankin hasn't kind of handed in his notice. What I don't understand is why Hamilton haven't asked him for his notice, I suppose.
Yeah, it's a situation that's only really going to get worse. And they played Dunfermline this weekend. I suppose we can't really look too far into the future. Dunfermline play Livingston. By the time this podcast has gone out, they'll have played each other. So we don't know how that'll set up. You would imagine Livingston will have won that match. Although I'm sure Dunfermline beat Livingston quite comfortably at East End Park earlier in the season.
It did, yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see how that one goes. But that's a huge game at the bottom of the table, and that'll have ramifications not just for the two sides, but for Airdrieonians and Queen's Park as well. Just finally, can Wraith Rovers get into the final playoff place?
No, absolutely not.
Cool. Victor Wanyama, Shaughan. Just as a bit of a bonus, just while we're in the championship, Victor Wanyama.
I've never seen anything like it.
We'll set the scene, Shaughan. Okay, we'll set the scene. Okay. So Victor Wanyama, the former Celtic and Tottenham Hotspur midfielder, joined the Pars after leaving Montreal Impact in January. Dubbed like the most impressive thing to happen to the town of Dunfermline since like Andrew Carnegie set sail for United States. Like some folks say it's like the biggest coup in the Scottish second tier. Wasn't sure about that at the time. Definitely not sure about it now. Came on a substitute. I think about 64 minutes into the match between Ayr United and Dunfermline at the weekend, and in the 84th minute, he gets the ball played into him about 25 yards from goal, falls over. And then Mark McKenzie, who's right on top of him and is about to go clean through and goal, and Wanyama just slaps the ball away from his feet. Red card for denial of a clear goal-scoring opportunity. And it's, as far as debuts go, I'm trying to think, probably like Roy Keane against Clyde in terms of bad debuts.
I mean, he was dreadful. Like, the only thing I would maybe stick up for him is in terms of his weight. I didn't think he was quite as big as what people made him out to be. And I think the picture where the referee was giving him a red card, it looked like he was quite hefty at that point. I think that was to do with the wind in terms I was affecting his jersey rather than it being skin tight.
Yeah.
However, that said, he's not fit, and it'll take him weeks to get fit, and he hasn't completed he hasn't played for about 12 months. He's not completed 90 minutes for almost 2 years.
Wow.
And he very much looked like a player that hasn't played for a couple of years. And you have to bear in mind that in terms of why he wasn't getting a game at Montreal, one of the players that was keeping him out is it Victor Yaturi, that couldn't get a game or wasn't very good for Ross County?
Victor Laturi, I think it is.
Yes. So he was playing in the middle of the park and Wanyama wasn't. Now, that's somebody who wasn't very good. So this whole kind of suggestion that Wanyama is, wow, he's going to be amazing in the championship. I'm not so sure.
I don't know why people don't read up on it. Why is a guy who was playing the Champions League final in 2019, why is he signing Dunfermline, right? There's a reason for that, because something has gone... over that intervening period, something has gone badly wrong. And you can easily go and look at the stats of the games that he's played and how he's gone. You can go and read up on comments from Montreal Impact fans on social media and find out what they thought to gauge it. But there's a reason there, because ultimately he's been wrecked by injuries, can't get a gig anywhere else, and that's why he's dropped into the second tier with his old manager. It feels like and this is not being smart after the fact, because this is how I think I said this on a View from the Terrace like last Friday prior to when we previewed the match. It's the sort of signing that by the time he's up to speed, the season's finished, and I think Dunfermline will be paying him a lot of money and won't get much in return.
Yeah, I mean, maybe he'll be up to speed by the time he plays Steny in the playoffs, but who knows?
Hope not. Hope Mikey Anderson and Scott McGill run over the top of him. But that leads us nicely into League One. We'll round up the action at the top of the division, and it looks like Arbroath are the League One champions in waiting. They've put themselves into an unassailable lead at the summit. They defeated Cove Rangers 1-0, and Stennismuir lost 3-2 at home to Montrose, meaning the Lichties have opened up an 8-point gap at the top of the table with just 5 games remaining. And stranger things have happened. But I think at this stage of the season, with as little time remaining, it would take something pretty spectacular for them to chuck it away.
Yeah, I mean, I think Arbroath had you have to say fair play in terms of the management team. Bear in mind, they came in, I don't think Arbroath had won a game when they came in. I don't know if they were bottom, but certainly they were either 10th or maybe even 9th. But regardless, the difference they've made, albeit I do think they had a good League One team that was underperforming, took them into January where they were doing quite well, had unusually, I think, had quite a shake-up on the squad that was doing well in January. But I think they've come out of January and are just in a far stronger and better place. And I think in terms of like Fraser Taylor, for example, who set up the only goal,
looked like he had a good game here.
I mean, I think he's got something like 14 assists and 6 goals for a guy who doesn't play up front. I mean, he's just. I think he's been the best player in League One. But I think they have the best squad. Don't get me wrong, but the difference that management team have made on the the Lichties, you have to say fair play.
Yeah, I really enjoyed listening to David Gould's post-match interview, and he looked like he was wrapped up warm for for this one. So glad it was him and not Colin Hamilton. You know who I'd actually compare them to? David Gould is like Tommy at the start of Train Spotting. Colin Hamilton is like Tommy in the middle of Train Spotting. That's who I'd compare the two of them to. But
there's certainly not one I want to listen to. Put it
yes, aye. But I thought it was really interesting when he was talking about the conditions, and there's a really funny bit. I think it was right at the start of the match. Fraser Fivey, he needs to actually wait for the wind to die down so he can take he can take centre. Passes it back to a teammate, and the teammate sort of gently clips it forward, and the ball just sails out of play and bounces out. Oh right, there's a harbinger of what we're going to get from this game. But I think it was the point that David Gould was making, and I think this is testament to guys like Fraser Taylor. You know, for instance, he said that because of the conditions and because of how much huff and puff there was, guys like Fraser Taylor having to do things that they wouldn't necessarily want to do, and that's like run around a lot, exert a lot of energy, just getting into the right positions. But I think that's the kind of game where I was thinking, if Fraser Taylor's been able to do that, like sacrifice himself for the good of the team, that's the sort of thing that holds him in good stead going forward, and hopefully he goes back to St Mirren and can make an asset of himself, because he certainly, I mean, the number of times as well he would just like dribble and beat players, and it didn't always come off for him, but it looked as though that, I mean, in the second half especially, I think he had a really good opportunity to score, and it was good, to the point of making, it was good to listen to David Gould explain how the team won it, and he was full of praise for the dig and the effort that they showed.
Yeah, and I think that what's interesting is in terms of they have. So you've mentioned somebody who's young, but it's quite clearly talented. They also have like Sam Stanton, for example, who I think has had a good game at the weekend, and certainly over the last 3 or 4 weeks has had a really good spell. But then Cove Rangers have got players who should be able to maybe not quite be as good as Fraser Taylor or Sam Stanton, but regardless, they've got quality in there and experience, but they don't do that. So in terms of Fivey and Scully and Yule and Megginson, who obviously got a red card, and that ultimately is why they won't win the league, and I expect probably won't win the playoffs either. There's something about them that doesn't quite, I can't put my finger on it, but there's something that doesn't quite sit right about Cove, even though they have talent and experience, but something isn't quite right, and I don't know how to sum it up.
That's a good point. I don't really know how to sum up Cove Rangers either. I think that it's that they could have got, like, if you want to compare them to Arbroath, for instance, like Arbroath in January were able to bring in, they will take, like, extend Fraser Taylor, Fraser Taylor's contract, which was such a huge boon. Then you can bring in Sam Stanton, and straight away everyone's like, well, there you go, you've signed the best central midfielder in the league. Then you can go and get Andy Winter on loan from Livingston.
Yeah.
Then you can go and bring in Aaron Muirhead on loan from Partick Thistle. So it's the idea that the league is very much there for the taking. You know, no outstanding teams, and they were able to go and sign players that I don't think any other team in the division could. Stennismuir strengthened to an extent by bringing in like Scott McGill. I think that he came in January, who's been a fantastic player for Stenny. But it's like they were able to do that, and I just don't think that Cove Rangers have done that. They weren't able to do it, and so that's why they haven't been able to take advantage and kick on. Small squad of players as well.
They extended
Adam
Emsley, but that you're right. That was about it. There was no over and above that. There was nothing there.
Yeah, I think as well for Arbroath, it's since losing to Stennismuir in mid-February, they've gone on a 7-game unbeaten streak, and you could say like the performances during that weren't particularly impressive, and you can include the draw at Dumbarton, then following up with a by drawn at Kelty Hearts, conceding an injury time equaliser in that game. But ultimately, like 7 games unbeaten is impressive, and that's the thing when you get to this stage of the season, and it is a cliche, but it's probably a fair comment. Sometimes it's just about grinding out the results and just making sure that you don't lose. And I think that's what we saw in the games, like when they went to Dumbarton and won 2-1. on a horrible pitch on a miserable day, just getting the win there. And Dumbarton are in a bad place at the moment. And yeah, they were on the slide towards being relegated. But to be able to do that, I think that's testament to the spirit within the team. And it's easy to be spirited when you've got something tangible to reach for in terms of the tournament. But in terms of the championship. But I really liked what David Gold said again after the match, where he was talking about his players and said, you don't get too high in football, you don't get too low. The guys there, they'll be really happy. But it comes to training, that game will be forgotten about, and it's just on to the next one on the Tuesday. And that's where our growth are at the moment. And I think as well, from Paul Hartley's post-match interview and Gary Naismith's post-match interview as well after the Stenny Montrose game, I think they have both conceded that it's unlikely that they're going to win the league. So it's like you say, it's like, as we said at the top there, it's going to take something pretty catastrophic for Arbroath to chuck it away at this stage.
Yeah, totally. And the other thing I thought was quite interesting in terms of the playoff positions in League One, bear in mind we've been probably understandably down on them for the vast majority of this season, is Queen of South, because they have kind of snuck into that top four position, and certainly in terms of the highlights I watched from the weekend, might have been the best I've seen from them. I thought they looked excellent would be a push, but certainly second half I thought they were very, very impressive. And bear in mind they can't win away from home. I would have to check their fixtures between now and end of the season. But if the majority of their fixtures are at home, they have a good chance of getting in the top four.
Now, while I didn't watch their highlights, I did watch the tail end of the Arbroath Cove Rangers highlights, and probably one of my favourite bits of commentary over the course of the season was when Mitch Megginson was sent off. I don't know who the co-commentator was. It wasn't, and I don't know who the commentator was, but there was out there said, "Oh, it's a red, ho ho, ta-ta,
ta-ta,"
and then adios muchachos to Megginson.
So it's interesting, like normally if I watch Arbroath highlights I think maybe you're not the most professional man in the world when you're shouting about beans on toast. I thought they had a very professional, kind of mature sounding commentator, but their co-commentator was really kind of allowing things to get away from himself, I suppose.
Yes, that was, he's hit the beans on toast. I think that became a parody, but like, adios muchachos to Megginson. That was almost, remember the East Fife commentary about how do you like them apples? It's almost on par with that. Can we talk then briefly about the Stennismuir Montrose game?
If you'd like to talk about that looked like a game of two halves.
Yeah, very much so, and I agree. As I tend to do a lot of time, watching the game and then watching Gary Naismith's thoughts on the after the game. The third goal was the killer. The third goal was the killer because after going 2 down, I actually thought Stenny were still in the match, and I think that you want to get the players in at half time. Make a substitution, regroup, give them a fucking rocket or something, and then send it back out there. But that third goal going in when it did in first half injury time effectively killed us a contest, and Stennismuir have had some work to do to get back into it. Blair Alston pulled one back, and I think with about 15 or so minutes to go, Corey O'Donnell got put through on goal and put his shot past the post. Now, had that gone in, you've got a decent period of time to get a third, maybe even a fourth. He put it wide, it didn't go in. And although Stenny pulled one back, it was like 3 minutes to go, and you just knew that they were going to run out of time. The worry for Stennismuir is, in the last couple of matches they've lost, they've developed a bad habit of conceding goals in batches. So there was 2 goals in, I think, 2 or 3 minutes there with Owen Sturton and Callum Sandilands. Sorry, Sandilands opened the score and Sturton got the second. They did it. It happened at Inverness Caledonian Thistle, where they got 2 goals. Their third and fourth goals were in the space of about 4 minutes of each other. And at Cove Rangers, when they lost 4-0, those goals were within a short period. That's a worrying trend. And on top of that as well, Stennismuir have actually got one of the, I think they've got joint with Arbroath, the fewest number of goals conceded. But when Stenny tend to lose, it tends to be by quite a big margin. So that's something that they need to watch. And there's sort of 2 conflicting thoughts in my head. On one hand, there's, Stennismuir have had an absolutely phenomenal season, and I don't think anyone, maybe other than the players and the manager, could have foreseen that they'd have gone into maybe about 5-6 of the season challenging for the title, falling away the last few games remaining. But that first half performance against Montrose was really poor. And I think the players, they do rightfully get a lot of praise, but that performance wasn't good enough. And so there's a smattering of boos coming off the pitch. My friends and I were in the group chat discussing it and saying, the players have been excellent, so why would you want to get in their backs? But the same token, we've been telling the players have been excellent, so maybe sometimes you've got to remind them that what we're seeing here is not good enough.
Yeah, I mean, totally, in terms of, as much as it's certainly at the start of the season, you probably didn't expect to have a tilt at the title. But considering how this season has gone, you're still allowed to be disappointed at being 3-0 down to Montrose and the last weekend in March and ultimately losing 3-2. I do think you're allowed to display how annoyed you are at the end of that game.
Aye, but it's frustrating because it has been an excellent season. However, really want to say fair play to Montrose, because I think we've been quite down on them over the course of the season so far, but that first half performance was excellent, and I've got a degree of sympathy for them in terms of you're 3-0 up at half time. It's all you got to tell the players is to keep it tight, and if you lose one goal, you naturally become a wee bit more conservative and allow the other team to come on to you. I think that happens at most levels of football, but I thought the best player in the part was Craig Whiting, which I didn't think I would say. I called him a washed ball fraud at the start, but he was really good here. He was really good. I'm going to use something that Tori Anderson said a lot. A lot of the stuff he was doing was deliberate. There was balls getting played up to him, and his movement was really good. And he really gave Sam Fisher in particular a hard time. And Sam Fisher's got a lot of stuff going on outside of football at the moment he was taken off at half time. But Whiting played really, really well, and he linked up really well with the players around him. Blair Lyons, I thought, had a good game. Blair Lyons appears to be in pretty good form at the moment. He was excellent against Annan Athletic the previous week. Owen Sturton looks like he's got a real chance at Dundee United next season. Really energetic, still got a bit to learn, but just a really good performance, just a nuisance. And same with Callum Sandilands. He was sort of the conduit between the base of midfield and bringing the ball into attack, took both his goals very well. And on top of that, I thought Shaughan Dillon had an excellent game at centre back at 41. I thought that by putting Matty Aitken up against him, I thought that would be the kind of game that Dillon would want, rather than Corey O'Donnell, because Corey O'Donnell can move around. Corey O'Donnell will take you into places that you don't necessarily want to go. Like Dillon wants to be dragged out towards the touchline. Dillon basically wants to stand in the middle of the pitch and just head the ball back where it's came from. And I think that O'Donnell would have given him something to think about. But Aitken just wants to back in. Aitken wants a wee scrap with him. And that's something that Shaughan Dillon's very good at. So he had a good game. And I think it feels like Montrose will probably just need about 3, maybe 4 points for the rest of the season, and they'll probably be safe. Yeah,
I mean, I'll be honest, I think they are already safe. I know there was some comments about, if we could just put a few wins together, maybe we could gate crash fourth, but no, that won't be the case. However, I was a wee bit worried about them potentially getting sucked into ninth, but no, I think they'll be absolutely fine. But I think Whiting's an interesting one in terms of, everybody knows he is a good footballer, an intelligent footballer, but it feels like his level is kind of championship, top end of League One. I'm not entirely sure how that happened, but it just feels like that is the case.
Yeah, I mean, well, Hearts paid money to sign him from Dundee, so there's obviously at one point where he was a really good player, and it's just that he still has his uses. But yeah, I think at Dunfermline, especially at that level, just as the good stuff was just replaced by hard running and hard work. Yeah. And maybe that's it, you drop down to a level where you can express yourself a bit more. And he certainly, he had a good game here, and I don't think we were really able to handle him. And because he was so good, it just made everyone else around him play really well as well. So yeah, fair play to Montrose, a team that I really like. And if they can stay up this summer, then Stuart Peachey can start turning that team around. Only then can he start turning the team around. So we'll finish the podcast by heading to Stair Park in League 2 to discuss Stranraer 1, Clyde 2. And this match had some ending to it, my word. Stranraer took the lead with 10 minutes to go through a Mark Russell penalty. Then shortly afterwards, Mark Russell would collect a second booking. Martin Rennie would score from the free kick. And what a fucking goal this was. This was absolutely stunning. And then in the 92nd minute, the big forward would score from a neat finish to win the game. Stranraer are still in 7th. They're probably safe at this stage. And Clyde, they've given theirs chance of staying up an enormous boost too. They're 1 point in one place behind them. This match played in absolutely horrendous conditions. I think they said in commentary the game was delayed by 15 minutes to get the pitch into nick to play. And going by certainly Lawrence Nelson and Cammy Ritchie and Chris Aitken speaking after the match, Stranraer cannot believe the fact that they lost this match.
I'm not sure I agreed with anybody in terms of this game. I didn't think Stranraer dominated. I didn't think Clyde were terrific, unlike the person who interviewed Dan Young. I didn't think the free kick. I thought the keeper. I thought Sam Kane maybe should have saved the free kick.
You reckon?
It didn't move that much. It didn't go in the box. Okay, maybe it moved, but it didn't go into the top corner or the bottom corner. It was kind of. I think he maybe made about 2 steps to the left, and then at that point he was flummoxed. But I thought he maybe should have done better.
Refuse to believe it. I think it was a very deliberate. Martin Rennie spotted the ball, put the valve just where his laces were over through it, and that ball swerved in the air like nobody's business. And he had no chance. It's funny you should say after watching that goal, the first thing I did was go into YouTube and just watch Janino Pernambucano's goals. And effectively it was an 8-minute compilation of this guy scalping the ball from about 40 yards. And I thought, Martin, it's not as good. I've just seen Martin Rennie do that down at Stair Park. It's all right. It's all right.
Don't get that. That was a really, really good free kick. I thought Sam Kane maybe could have done a wee bit better.
Well, I tell you what we should have done there. The match officials should have done better. I can't believe Robbie Foster's goal was disallowed. Yeah.
So there was a lot of chat about poor refereeing decisions, I suppose. Poor refereeing decisions. Whether it was the offside goal or the penalty that Shaughan got or the red card. But I thought out of the three. The offside goal that Foster should have got was the worst of the three. Yeah,
because I think it's Craig Howie that played. Just to describe, if you've not seen, I think it's Elliot Dunlop gets the ball just inside the box, curls it, it hits the post, bounces off Jay Kennedy, and lands perfectly for Foster to hit the ball into the net from a yard out. Disallowed for offside. However, Craig Howie's playing him on, and you can see, even though the camera's at an angle in the stand at Stair Park, you can see he's been playing on side. The fact that the linesman have been looking at that, and you've got the line on the pitch from the 6-yard box, I think that was a really poor call. I don't like digging out match officials, but that felt like that. You scored that time. I don't know when's that in the game, midway through the second half. Changes the complexity of the game. The other ones, I thought it was Murdoch did handle the ball. You can see it go in. You can see him go into it, and he's a good couple of yards away from it. And the free kick, Mark Russell's second yellow card that Rennie ultimately scored from, hard to tell. They didn't think it was on commentary, and Chris Aitken didn't think it was a foul either. So I inconclusive. I know that's not what anyone wants to hear about a fence sitting there, but I'm going to go for inconclusive for that one. I
can see why the referee gave it, but there's also an argument it's a free kick to Stranraer.
Yeah,
so a lot of the argument is, well, he went in with his studs up. I think he did go in with his studs up. Like he certainly wins the ball. Then there's a carry through, but it almost looks like that the top of his foot is caught, rather than him catching anybody else. So I thought it was harsh. But then by the same token, I think his first yellow was essentially telling the referee to fuck off. So he was very much on a kind of thin line at that point, and ultimately that was a line that was like that he created. So it was borderline. Yeah. So I didn't have an issue with it, but I thought it was a wee bit harsh.
I'd like to think the referee said, "Yeah, who's fucking off now?" when he holds up the red card. Off you go. Off you go. I suppose for this one as well, it feels like both teams are safe. I think they probably just need like maybe 1, maybe 2 points each, and it feels like that battle at the bottom is just really between Forfar and Bonnyrigg Rose.
Yeah, I mean, there was probably I think I had in my head that maybe Stranraer could have got in the top 4. That was probably a situation that was just never happening. But you're right, it's between Bonnyrigg and Forfar, and I'm not sure. Both of them are bad, so who knows what could happen.
I also watched Marcus Rashford's free kick for Manchester United against Chelsea, and I thought Martin Rennie's was better. I watched Cristiano Ronaldo's free kick for Manchester United against Portsmouth. I thought Martin Rennie's was better. I've got to say, I thought Martin Rennie's second goal was really well taken as well. The header, it's a corner kick, headed back across the face of goal by Craig Howie, and he seems to just like... I don't know if it's deliberate or not. I'm going to assume it is because I think Martin Rennie's capable of it. But he seems to fall backwards and flick it, just get a toe in it into the net. I think it's Josh, it might be wrong, but I think it's Lewis Reid, beg your pardon. I think it's Lewis Reid that's marking him and just is able to sort of lean back and flick it in. But so I really like Rennie. Anytime I see him, you know who he reminds me of? He reminds me of Chris Templeman. In terms of just like a big guy who's... Do you think I was going to say someone reminds me of Didier Drogba? Like some sort of really...
Yeah, I did wonder.
But he reminds me of Chris Templeman in the way that, you know, he's a big lad, but perhaps like using his height and his strength isn't necessarily a strong point. He's quite a technical player. He's good with the ball at his feet. And he's also capable of scoring some great goals. You mean... Like he scored one last season against Stennismuir in that 6-1 game from about 30 yards. Where he just melted it, absolutely wellied it like an Exocet missile. And that free kick there, I don't think there are many players in the lower leagues that could score a goal as good as that.
Fair play to them. And for all that we wondered if there might be a bit of bother, then they're absolutely fine for next season. And then maybe next season they won't trouble the bottom end of League 2, but they probably will.
Yeah, hope not. That's Stranraer, Clyde you're talking about. Hope don't trouble the bottom.
I was meaning Clyde, but I said probably both.
Yeah, I can see it. You can see that happening again. There's stuff earlier today on this Tuesday. There's stuff about reconstruction in Scottish football. About I thought it was an April Fool's joke at first, but then I actually realised it came in mid-afternoon and thought, maybe that's past the time. But we don't have time to go into it, and I haven't read it through properly, so. I'm not prepared I'm not prepared to make an arse of myself. I make an arse of myself on this podcast every fucking waking hour, every single second that I'm on it. So I think that's probably a good time we'll just leave it at that. We'll talk about the games, and you can leave the administrative stuff to the big brains who know about that kind of thing.
Class.
Well, Shaughan, you know something, it's been really good to get back into bed with you. It's like sleeping with an old lover after wasting your time philandering with lesser participants. It's just so much better. It just feels right.
This that wasn't how I would describe it, but I have enjoyed it. So I'm glad you have as well.
Well, thank you, mate. I appreciate that. And if you like what you've heard and want to hear more, please do consider subscribing to our Patreon. There's tons of stuff in there covering everything about Scottish football. We mentioned there's a reaction to the Challenge Cup from a Queen's Park fan and a Livingston fan, but there's listicles, there's deep dives, there's laughter, there's quizzes, there's something for everyone as long as you like Scottish football. If you don't like Scottish football, then keep your hand in your pocket because you're just wasting your money. It's all yours for as little as £2 a month, and it won't get much in this economy, but it will get you that. Also, A View from the Terraces on the BBC iPlayer, and it's also the old-fashioned television on Friday. Do tune in. We really, really need all the help we can get at this stage. Lobby your MSP and think about getting in touch with the BBC themselves and saying, give them another go. They're really cool guys. Now, there's a lot of football taking place over the next few days, and if you're attending a match or just streaming one from your snooker room, we hope you enjoy yourself. But please, unlike the Partick Thistle fans who tried to rush the cowshed at Capello on Saturday for some reason, please enjoy your football respectfully. Thank you and goodbye.